Hi, welcome to Project Geospatial, everybody. Here with the Geospatial Frontier Virtual Technology Fair, hosted by Project Geospatial and partnered with the American Geographical Society. Here with me in this session is Andy Deering. Andy Deering is in St. Louis as part of the GeoFutures program, among several other things. And I'm going to let Andy give a brief introduction to himself before we dive into the topic for today's session.
Great, thanks, Adam. Yes, my name is Andy Deering. I have been a St. Louis native and in the geospatial arena for the past over 15 years, almost 20 years now, and have worked with organizations like Esri and was formerly the CEO of Boundless Spatial. Now, a really exciting opportunity. I've been leading up with the GeoFutures initiative here, which we'll be talking about, but a strategic growth plan around creating and retaining and making St. Louis the geospatial hub and center of growth in the world, and have a lot of great opportunities and a lot of excitement and momentum going on here in St. Louis.
Awesome. Can you just talk about the GeoFutures and what that is compared to what existed before GeoFutures and you know, how's that connected with existing facilities like the Geosaurus and just how it's bringing everything together from NGA and the consistent growth going on out there, especially considering the current crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a good question. Let me peel that one back for a few different areas. So geospatial in St. Louis is not new by any means. It's the roots of map making and discovery and everything else, can date back to Lewis and Clark. And then, fast forward, with what NGA's presence has been in some of its predecessor organizations for many years. What we've done here in St. Louis and grown in the map making space and eventually the geospatial sciences space has been very key and instrumental for many years. What wasn't known is all the other organizations that were doing things in the region around geospatial, and even moreover, understanding, for example, what NGA was doing. Most of the work that they were doing was behind a closed wall, in a closed building with security guards that were around, and it made it really hard to get to. And so, but what NGA, a couple of things interesting have happened over the past 4 to 5 years. NGA decided that they were going to build a new campus here in St. Louis as their West headquarters. And they decided to and chose St. Louis. Director Cardillo chose St. Louis as part of a competitive bidding process and site selection process. That paved a way for an opportunity for engagement from the community and started connecting a lot of dots. And as well as what NGA's mission was changing into is doing a few more things in the open, trying to be more collaborative with industry, and then also having the community aspect, knowing that where the building was going into was in an area that had been neglected and has been neglected for many years. And so using that as an opportunity to connect with the community, providing opportunities to, pathways and those sorts of things was kind of key there. As that went along, back in 2018, there was a GeoInt symposium that was held, and there were several leaders from the St. Louis geospatial industry that were sitting around a table and said, how do we take advantage of this opportunity? How do we start connecting some dots? And under USGIF's umbrella, how do we start looking at K through 12, and how do we start looking at universities and research and development, and how can we start connecting dots between entrepreneurs and start really taking advantage of the opportunity of building an ecosystem here in St. Louis? And so out of that, a working group was created called the St. Louis Area Working Group, or otherwise known as the SLOG, and had been created and grown into over a 300 to 400 person or member organization that's been meeting on a monthly basis since that, and really starting to dive into some of these areas and starting to build out some pathways, and a lot of great work was done. The one thing that was not accomplished or not cited or worked on from that working group was economic development. USGIF does a lot of great things, but that was the one area that said, hey, we can't choose or help, one city over another. That's not a part of what we do. And so what the city of St. Louis did in the Economic Development Committee, they created an economic development roundtable of local economic development leaders, as well as geospatial entrepreneurs, businesses, and organizations all around, to try to figure out also how do we develop and recruit businesses and take advantage of this great asset that we had here in St. Louis, around geospatial technologies companies and the NGA. So from there, a report was, an initial baseline study was created or performed in saying, hey, is there really something here? Is St. Louis have something that can really be built upon from a development perspective? And sure enough, that report showed that there was over 28,000 direct and indirect jobs in the geospatial industry in St. Louis. There was tens to hundreds of millions of dollars of work that was going on in the geospatial industry here in St. Louis, with the potential of it only growing year over year. And so the next step in after that baseline study was something that we had done 20 years ago here in St. Louis, when we created a cluster around plant and life sciences and biotech. There's a lot of great organization. There was a lot of great research that was being done. The Human Genome Project was ongoing. Washington University was embarking on some of this. But what they looked at that time 20 years ago was and created a report that provided a strategic roadmap and pathway to help take advantage of the assets that they currently had around plant and life sciences, and ended up paving the way for the creation of some assets that are here today, whether it be research and development funding, whether it be entrepreneurial or venture capital funding, and moreover, the creation of places where R&D and technology innovation can happen. So where Cortex happened, or where T-Rex downtown has happened. And so that report is 20 years old, and even up until last year, we even had Bunge International take its headquarters from New York and bring it here to St. Louis. And you can also just connect the dots and say, hey, that was something that that report 20 years ago helped pave the way for strategic decisions by large, Fortune 100 companies to make decisions based off of that. So that's what we want to do here in St. Louis. And the interesting part that is different from what we have today versus what they had 20 years ago when they were creating the Plant and Life Sciences report was there's a lot of things already going on, right? We have a big, large government organization, but we have a lot of large industry partners and organizations that are already doing great things in geospatial, that were already developing K through 12 programming, that were already thinking about tech entrepreneurship, that were already creating venture capital and seed funding for those things. And so the cool part about it, as we've created and generated this report, is we've been able to start it's not a building strategy. It's actually just accelerating and going strategy and aligning all of these assets that we have here in St. Louis. So that's the fun part. And to answer the last part of your question about Geosaurus is one of those great assets that has been created over the past, Patty Hagan and the team at T-Rex, 4 years ago, had this idea of how do we take advantage of this, and they made some very strategic moves on building, a place where innovation and collaboration can happen by creating blowing out most of the fourth floor there, the T-Rex building, and focusing on geospatial, but now also following up with programming, following up with acceleration dollars to be able to help those entrepreneurs and provide those resources that are needed, and especially doing it downtown and building up, our tech resources that are here in the region. So a lot of awesome stuff is happening, and a lot of exciting activities going on.
So I want to take that two different ways. First thing I think is on everybody's immediate minds is how has the current crisis impacted the geospatial growth, and is there even much of an impact at all? And what's being done to kind of mitigate that or continue that innovation and business growth?
Well, Adam, that's an important question, right? I think it would. Everything has been impacted, right? It was some in a more than anything, a negative impact has been created from the COVID outbreak. For geospatial, it really from a positive impact perspective, like maybe it's stunted some growth plans for some organizations that are around here, but it hasn't slowed down any of the geospatial growth and development. But more importantly, what came out of that is the healthcare alignment, and actually realizing, early on in our report that we were generating, we had started touching on what you can consider geo-health, right, and how geospatial applies to the healthcare industry. We have a large healthcare contingent or conglomerate here in St. Louis that does a lot of research, that does a lot of innovative techniques and growth, and applying, using geospatial technologies for population health analysis, or using geospatial for, understanding some, they were trying to track, population health and densities to diseases and other things. And that research had been ongoing up until the pandemic. What ended up happening was when the pandemic hit, all those resources went solely focused on that. And so St. Louis University and their GeoSLU and the Geospatial Institute that they have there put all their chips in, and we're starting to really work on what the research looked like and starting to track the pandemic, but then also what does that mean for the region? Likewise, Washington University, along with the healthcare systems, all started aligning and starting to try to use geospatial technologies to help, from a myriad of questions that were being asked. Where are vulnerable populations? Where are things being, where is funding being applied? Where is exposure happening? And so all of those questions have a location aspect. And for us folks that are in the geospatial industry, we all know this and it's native. But for the folks that were not there and drawing and making those connections, especially as it related to the pandemic, really, really became more and more prevalent. And so the interesting thing is, it's actually, you think about where the pandemic is and where geospatial is here in the region, I would say it's stronger now than ever. And the opportunities to continue to utilize the work that we're doing for good and for the future, and taking the assets that we currently have here and growing them, is the potential and the opportunity is greater now more than ever.
Thank you, Andy, for that response. I think the next one would be associated with our transitioning military, and even and have some overlap with companies who want to move into St. Louis. As you've already said, you've brought a lot of companies into St. Louis with this initiative. Let's start with the companies first. What incentives? What's the advantages to going to St. Louis as a company? What's the draw in for bringing organizations to be centered around that area? Other than the obvious, NGA being built there and a few other things. I mean, what is the major selling point there?
I think the most obvious reason is we have a great baseball team, and even an awesome hockey team that's still holding on to the cup. Let that be known. But no, I think there's a lot of benefits and advantages here in St. Louis for businesses. And I'm not speaking on behalf of our business recruitment function, but the attractiveness of St. Louis is manyfold. One, is the ability to work here and the cost benefit of working here in the region, whether it be lower rents, whether it be lower, average salary rates, the affordability of St. Louis. Not saying that has to be the number one selling point. As a business owner, as an entrepreneur, that's the things you think about. And especially now, as you're tightening your belts, being able to operate in an area where the costs are low, that's vitally important. And so that's the one thing I want to point out here, is that we have a significant advantage over that. But you also need to have the talent to be able to execute on that. And so there is, there's never enough tech talent in any of the regions and cities that are in any clusters that are there, whether you be in the Bay Area or Austin, Texas, or here in St. Louis. But I will tell you right now that there's active growth of the tech talent, and doing it in several ways. One is exposure in K through 12 and building up the awareness of future pathways and opportunities. That's actively ongoing. All of the university programs have been re-baseline or shifting the way that they're doing their degree programs. Even yesterday on another broadcast, St. Louis University talked about some stackable ways that they're bringing in certificate programs into traditional degrees. You're starting to see a lot of the other local universities, and whether it be UMSL, the community colleges, and others that are trying to figure out degrees or certificate programs in data science or in computer science with a blend of data science. And as you think about geospatial, having a good geospatial understanding brought in. Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville has been a leader in this for many years, where they've had a computer science program blended with their geospatial program and then applying that to certain problems in field work. That's the type of creativity that's going to continue to build the tech talent workforce that's here, and we have a lot of great resources that are being built. And then I think lastly is some of the non-traditional programs that we do have here. We have Launch Code, who has partnered up with NGA and is actually putting in and placing a lot of resources that may have come out or been part of a computer science program or a geography program or some other maybe not even in the computer science field, training them up on the computer science domain, giving them the basic skills to do data science or computer science, giving them some understandings about, basic, geospatial development, and NGA is able to take in and bring in those folks and train them and teach them about the NGA mission and put them to work. And a lot of other industry partners are doing that as well. So, and that's a quicker turnaround than maybe waiting 2 to 4 years for somebody to come out of a degree program. That's helping the immediate stopgap and bringing people into the workforce. So, affordability, the technical talent, and the motivation of organizations here. And then lastly, I think the connections that are made. We talk about NGA being here and obviously one of the largest geospatial employers in the region, but we also have, Bayer Crop Sciences, we have Enterprise, we have Express Scripts, we have Edward Jones, and there's a lot of data science, a lot of computer science, and a lot of geospatial work that's actually occurring in a lot of those organizations. And when we started looking at the baseline study about the assets that we currently have here in the centers of excellence, national security is 1, agriculture is 2, transportation logistics being 3, and what we have at Transcom and all the great work that's being done on the Illinois side of the river, but also pairing that up with, Enterprise and some other local logistics technology companies that are around here. And then lastly, healthcare and what we're doing here, and obviously the evolution of what that is and how it relates to the work that's being done now. So I think there's a lot of advantages for organizations, especially that are doing some sort of location or data science work, to come to St. Louis and see what we're all about here, because it's booming with innovation and tech entrepreneurship, and especially around geospatial and location intelligence.
No, thank you, Andy, for that. We do actually have a question come in. It's funny. Once again, it overlaps with everything you just said a little bit, but focusing on the individuals a little bit. Where would you recommend either geospatial professionals or aspiring geospatial entrepreneurs, or even that matter, transitioning military? Where would you recommend the first place they look in terms of St. Louis on getting involved with the industry out there? Aside from just looking for job boards out there, because I know there's a lot of opportunities that, aside from looking at your LinkedIn monsters, etc., you offer a lot more than that out there, and I want to create awareness of some of these programs and initiatives, some of which you just highlighted, but I want to kind of focus on the individual here.
Yeah, so that's there's a lot of opportunities, and especially, but where do you go, right? That's the challenge. And for individuals that are coming in and starting to try to dip their toes into understanding the ecosystem, there's a couple of different things, right? You can, especially now, it's kind of interesting where you can dip your toe into the St. Louis area working group meeting, so the SLOG. So if you want to know and kind of get connected with different groups, we've gone virtual because of the pandemic. It used to be an in-person meeting, and now we've been holding those, and the next one is actually next week, and you can find it on USGIF's website, but you can see presentations, get connected with individuals there, and that's really what that meetup and that working group is for. Likewise, there's a couple of other meetups that are here locally that focus on geospatial. I suggest that there's the St. Louis user group, which is the GIS user group that's here locally, that's run by St. Louis County. And you also, for the developers that are out there that are wanting to dip their toes into geospatial development, there's under meetup.com, there's a GeoSTL meetup, and they're actually having a meeting next week as well. So there's a lot of happenings that you can get into just to dip in and see what's going on. But from a career development perspective and knowing what jobs might be out there,
real quick on that as you continue that, so those programs and those working groups you just connected to, any way you can send us the link so we can post in the show notes, and folks who want to participate in that, I think I think calling those out as available and opportunities is a great initiative, and I love making people aware of those things, but I also want to make sure they can directly connect to those as quickly as possible, and get them the right avenue to say, hey, St. Louis is a hub. Let's connect you to these right opportunities and get you out there.
Yep, absolutely. I'll send those links over. Then for transitioning military, that's there's been some programs that have been developed and sponsored locally around that. And so if you're looking for development skill sets, I will bring up Launch Code again. And there's some others that are out there as well, whether it be, if you're interested in the cyber domain, Cyber Up here locally has been working at transitioning and building up tech talent in that area, but especially focused in on the military groups. Equally, what Launch Code has done here locally and has held a few cohorts out at Scott Air Force Base for transitioning military members who might want to become developers or become data scientists or become DevOps engineers. They have some pathways that are there. However, if those are enrollment programs, they are free once you're able to enroll in those, and you get accepted into the programs. But if you want to just dip your toe in and become part of the community, they do have some meetup groups that are held on. I believe that they were on Thursday evenings. But LaunchCode does have some free engagement programs where you can become and just be part of the meetup groups that they do have. They have the Coder Girl program that's there, where women in tech and they just want to get into the tech field. They have some opportunities that are there as well, and just meet up and kind of work on different projects or engagements around different technology areas, whether it be front end development, back end development, design, and whatnot. So I definitely check out LaunchCode's website, and they're really working hard to make sure that folks in the region know what the opportunities are out there. But I'd be remiss to say that there's a lot of other transitional workforce development opportunities and trainings and skill sets. And I'll definitely, add and provide you with those. I'm going to miss all of them that are available here, but there's going to be more, especially out of the GeoFutures efforts on centralizing what those opportunities are, the organizations that can provide those, especially as they relate to geospatial and tech here in the region.
That's great to hear, Andy. So with that said, what I want to kind of bring some attention to is, first of all, what skills do you think St. Louis in the geospatial industry is looking for the most right now, if there's an opinion on that? And then two, another question coming in here is, what are some of the, we'll call it, have you encountered any local or regional, or for that matter, federal policy hurdles, or just what are the kind of aha moments along the way that you all need to focus on more along? I think people want to understand some of the struggles with what you're doing with and what you've been able to overcome. Yeah.
So I'll start off with the skills needed in geospatial. So I think actually it was last week or a couple of weeks ago, NGA has been doing some more open broadcasts about their tech initiatives that they have ongoing. And I think they actually did a good job of explaining some of the talent that they're looking for and how their mission is geospatial first and forefront, but how it's becoming more of an IT or tech STEM type of skill set that's needed, where you have a blend of a developer, a traditional developer, married up with a data scientist, and great if you can also understand location technologies as well. Those are that blend of understanding both the data science and the analytical pieces of things, building models, using technologies and scripting codes like Python, using R for statistical modeling, building up some, and then being able to maybe push those out to a machine learning, algorithm, or building an algorithm and being able to run those. Those are always skill sets that are needed. Part of what we also found in our report is just the traditional data management, data architecture skill sets that are needed. As we all know, data is forefront and center to the geospatial, industry and the domain. And what we're doing is a lot of collection of data, analyzing that information, and then making decisions upon that. The interesting part is there's more sensors out there now monitoring location, monitoring movement that is being analyzed. And the challenge that a lot of organizations have is sifting through all that data, getting meaning and purpose out of that data to be able to answer those questions more effectively. And so a lot of that goes back to data management, how to really set up an architecture to be able to manage that. And so if you're interested in, the cloud infrastructures and modern kind of data management techniques and those sorts of things, building up your skill sets in that area is definitely worthwhile, because not only is the government looking for that, but even if you think about it in the agriculture arena, they're collecting information, whether it be from ground sensors that are sitting in the field, to digital temperature sensors, to satellite imagery that's flown daily over the grain belt. And they're focused in, while they might not be looking at where, people are moving or where, ammunitions are moving, like maybe what the government's doing, they're definitely looking at pixels and trying to aggregate that to make more informed decisions on where, application of fertilizer needs to be applied, or how the performance of certain hybrids are doing in certain crop conditions. So those skill sets are transferable not only in the government space, but in other tangential industries that are around here, and see that even coming more into the transportation logistics space, healthcare space, and others. So that's where I see skills are needed, but it's definitely tech. And it's maybe not as much the traditional like cartography skill sets that might have been there, 20 or 30 years ago. And it's more into data science, IT, tech, and development that's needed, and kind of hybridizing your skill sets. The second question you asked, Adam, was around local policies and things that people need to be or local environment and the challenges that we face. Every city has its challenges, and historically, the challenge that we've had is a lot of businesses have moved out of downtown St. Louis over the past 20 years, and whether it be AT&T having left not too long ago, and others, there's a big significant void in downtown. The great part about that is there's a lot of folks and a lot of organizations that are huddled around to say, how do we plan out downtown? How do we build tech-focused, tech industry-focused? And how do we, bring in businesses and recruit that? And how do we ultimately, build out the landscape and transform St. Louis? They're really, and I don't come from an economic development background, but putting together a comprehensive plan, which is what the city is doing, which they have not done in many years. We, from the GeoFutures side of things, have aligned our plan to that, and really focusing in on the neighborhood, and especially the neighborhood around NGA, but then really making sure that we are working in alignment with what the city's plans are and what the region's plans are about how we're going to grow this. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of divides that can happen between the city and the county, between Missouri and Illinois and others. The greatest part that we've seen, especially since the pandemic, there's been a unification in the region of thought leaders, of politicians, of entrepreneurs and elsewhere. And I think that's going to benefit the region immensely for many years to come.
Once again, thanks for that answer. Actually, thanks for both answers. I know I'm asking multiple questions at once. Once again, for those who are watching, feel free to ask questions within twitch.tv/Project Geospatial. I understand that I guess something's going on with our website. Some kind of, looks like the hosting service might be going through maintenance or something. But with that said, our twitch.tv/Project Geospatial is still live, as well as projectgeospatial.com, I believe. So if you're watching on there, ask questions through twitch.tv or through our Discord channel that we have set up for the conference website. We're going to keep Andy on for a couple more minutes while we discuss a few more topics, and if we don't get any more questions, that's going to be that. Andy, one more, a couple things I want to ask you about locally going on is you mentioned part of the GeoFutures and several conversations in the past that you're working on some type of report. What does that involve? And I don't want to allude to any kind of early press releases. I just want to I'm trying to understand what is this report coming and what can we look forward to?
Yeah, so no, nothing is under wraps at this point. To be perfectly transparent, over the past 8 months now, we've been working on a strategic roadmap and report. So similar to the one that we talked about with plant life sciences, we're building a strategic roadmap for the region with specific priorities and recommendations for St. Louis as it relates to building up this geospatial cluster. We partnered, and so the writers of the report was Techonomy. They were contracted out to write the report. They wrote the baseline study and continued on into writing the report. The report was intended to be launched at the GeoResolution event, which was St. Louis University and NGA partnering together at the end of March. That obviously was postponed due to COVID-19, but as we were looking at going forward, we will be releasing that in the late June timeframe and having a virtual launch event around that. So the report will be made publicly available for everybody and can go through it. Just as a quick preview, a lot of the things that we're talking about here, as we talk about a growth strategy, it provides recommendations about talent and workforce development, about how to really build capacity around, capital for innovators and entrepreneurs. Talks about, what can be applied in the region, in the neighborhood, specifically around NGA in that neighborhood. And then really the branding and marketing about making sure that St. Louis is a thought leader around geospatial and having an innovation district and corridor and collaborative around that going forward. And, specifically, specific details under each one of those that it recommends. But really this report has served as a guidepost for everybody in the community, everybody in the region, and folks that are coming to the region to say, hey, this is great. We want to continue to move forward on some priorities. If policies, legislature, investors, and others, it provides them a guiding principle of what we're doing here and what we need to do to continue to make St. Louis successful in growing the cluster here in St. Louis over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years to come.
Awesome. We're going to look forward to that, and hopefully we'll get some good coverage when that gets released. Post Absolutely. That on a few website locations. So with that said, looks like some of the technical difficulties on our website are causing some issues with folks asking questions. That's okay. We have had a plenty trickle through since the start of this broadcast. And so once again, I want to thank you for joining us, Andy. And before we close up for this session, is there any final thoughts, comments on some of the initiatives that you got going on, or any of the initiatives going on out there in this city of St. Louis that you want to give plugs for?
I first thank you for having us on, and I think the great part is if you're in St. Louis right now, if you're anywhere right now, you're looking for some bright moments to really lean on, and this is a really bright point. And granted, there's going to be a lot of recovery efforts throughout the world over the next 12, 18, 24 months. And this is a shining opportunity for the region, and especially in a recovery mode that we have going on. And you're going to see a lot of local leaders and regional leaders around the area really focusing in on how do we help provide opportunities for those in need. And this provides a great opportunity and platform for a lot of folks to be able to take advantage of that. But it's personally seeing it, having been in the geospatial profession for the past, almost 20 years, it's really refreshing to see how geospatial, again, every single day, and every time I say this, it's true. More people are talking about geospatial in the St. Louis region than ever before. When you have the zoo lining up and figuring out a geospatial strategy, I mean, that's a really interesting moment where they're involved in all of these communities, and everybody's thinking about geospatial and has mapping and that type of technology front and center. So really, we've got a great foundation. We've got a lot of motivated individuals here in St. Louis, and looking forward to seeing how this grows going forward.
Thanks a lot, Andy. And thank you for joining us once again. We're going to end it there, and appreciate you coming on with us, giving us an update on St. Louis. And I want to let you know, with the nearly 400 registered attendees with the Geospatial Frontier Conference, quite a few of them registered asking what's up with St. Louis, and they specifically asked about St. Louis when they joined the event. So I was like, whoa, I better get some folks on from St. Louis to talk about what the geospatial industry looks like out there. So that was part of the driver, but always a pleasure having you on regardless of that. And I can't wait to see how St. Louis evolves beyond this current year, and hopefully we get a chance to meet up at some trade shows and conferences, as I believe St. Louis is scheduled for the GeoInt Symposium still. Is it next year or the year after? I can't recall.
2023 and again in 2025, which that will align with some of the activities that NGA has going on with the build out of their campus as well. But yeah, two times in 3 years. We're looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, if that doesn't work out, we still got this format, and we'll see how it goes. Once again, I'm Adam Simmons with the Geospatial Frontier Virtual Trade Fair under Technology Fair under Project Geospatial, and partnered with the American Geographical Society, here with Andy Deering from St. Louis. Thank you very much.